Hey besties, welcome to Let's Talk SGBV, a podcast where we discuss everything relating to sexual gender-based violence with the aim to demystify the conversation and to end sexual gender-based violence in our community. I am your host, Hassan Nomaina, and I have here with me Fakhrriyyah Hashim, a social development researcher and the founder of the hashtag movement ArewaMeToo. Hi Fakhrriyyah.
Hi Hassan, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Wow, I don't even know where to start. I really never know where to start, but with you, I don't know where to start because the conversations are a lot, and then there's so many other conversations that we can have with regards to sexual gender-based violence because you're such a big voice, in when this topic is concerned. But I'm just going to talk about something in particular. So I think we're just going to narrow the conversation down to online gender-based violence because in as much as you talk a lot about sexual gender-based violence, your person have been subjected to a lot of online gender-based violence. And I just wanted us to talk about it and to shed some light on it. So yes, but we're going to start from the very beginning. I think sometime in 2018 with the movement that just started and you coining ArewaMeToo and the backlash that you got from it. Do you want to just walk us through?
Yeah. That was such a long time ago.
Yeah.
But still vivid. So with the advent of ArewaMeToo, a lot of young women sort of found their voices because so many people have had their own private experience, intimate experiences of abuse, but there wasn't that deep-rooted understanding of what some of these experiences really meant until people started riding on other people's voices to gain some understanding and be able to reflect that on their own experiences. And I think one of the most telling part for me was initially there was a lot of solidarity, particularly from this male majority of men in the North. And subsequently, we saw how that kind of changed so swiftly because men that had lent their support sort of began to believe that this was going to be endless and it was going to be directed at them at some point. And so that support they had lent initially, they kind of turned. And the most effective way they did this was going after voices. At this point, a lot of the girls or the young women that were lending their voice to ArewaMeToo were also very young women, a lot of them in university. And we know that is a very vulnerable place to be at in your life, and particularly in Northern Nigeria, being a university student, you're still young, you're still finding your voice, but there's so many societal barriers that keep you sort of confined within society's reason. So a lot of the attacks started at that point, right? And what we had initially seen as young women coming out of their shells, finding voices, a lot of whom, you're one, that would go on to become strong voices on their own. But in the same period, there were so many young women, particularly, that receded back into their shells as a result of that targeted abuses. And it seemed organized to a point, but we know well enough that a lot of these things are not as organized as we believe them to be. It's just a few women pinpointed and picked, and a bane of harassment is now then targeted at them for an extended period of time. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to not find their voices after experiencing the fears attacks of cyberbullying, especially those that have never experienced it before. But those that have been able to shoulder it and brace through, multiple experiences, sort of become untouchable in a way that, yes, the harassments do continue, but you sort of grow uh, thicker skin, and then like the unrelenting attacks sort of subside, because now you have a an army of support behind you. You have like friends and people that believe in the same causes that you advocate for, so that sort of becomes your support system in the online space, and that shields you from a lot, uh, to the point where you don't particularly have to engage with any of the harassment, because you have an army of people behind you already defending you. So what that does is it spares you the psychological weight of having to respond to a lot of attacks, which in the long term is really what serves you. Having people behind you, a support system, and your community of people in the same space of activism and advocacy in different spaces, having your back and interjecting to a point where you just focus on the message, while a lot of people ride for you, where you don't have to face these attacks.
Okay, so I think there are just lots of questions that can stem up from what you just said. But I think the most pressing for me is about being a voice, and because you have been attacked for a lot of things. One, for saying older men should not rape girls. Secondly, there are just so many things that you say. It seems like every time you say something, the people are often always willing to just come and attack. It's like sometimes it's like, oh, she just said good morning, because it's coming from Fakhrriyyah Hashim's page. There's just like the whole idea of, oh, let's just attack, before you even like make sense of what it is that you're saying. And then sometimes we see how this big army, that you've created also now then don't agree with certain things that you say, which is fine. We live in a civic society, so it's okay for people to disagree. But at what point does the disagreement now become an attack to your freedom of expression first, your freedom of speech, and then an attack on your life? And which, from the place I've been viewing, you've had a whole lot of these attacks, on your freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and then the right to life, because people are like, oh, you've said this thing and then we don't think you should live anymore. If I see you, if you come back to this country, I would kill you, so and so on and so forth. How do you reconcile that with the army that you say you have behind you? Because sometimes people might agree with you on this thing, and then when you say something else, they're like, oh, I agreed with her on that, but on this one, let's have our head on a stick.
I mean, like, that's the pattern. I think that's a healthy pattern to have within the confines of social media, because, like, never having people disagree with you. I don't think I've seen anyone that's never had people, like, even their friends disagree with them, like, on principle. But I think the main feature here is how people are attacking you, right? So a lot of the time it's that people already have a manufactured image of who you are. So no matter what the message is, if they abide by it, sometimes all they do is restrict themselves from the conversation. So never to show, agreement, but like when there is disagreements, like, okay, the usual suspect is here, like tweeting. But for me, like, I've learned to sort of sieve a lot of the elements apart. So what that means is having to separate from those that are, okay, wrong messenger at all times, and also having to see people that are actually about the conversation, because there's a way people talk to you that you do engage the conversation further, whether or not it leads to agreement. that doesn't matter. But yeah, there's a thin line between engaging someone to agree or disagree on, the basis of the subject matter and the strength of your argument. And then there is, those that come with the perception that, oh, it's the wrong messenger. So the message either doesn't matter or has to be the wrong message. And with that understanding, the latter, the from disagreement, it folds into abuse, and then it becomes threats, which on a like in the past few years have been like on a daily. As long as there's an engagement, there would be those kind of comments like, oh, oh, so you're still here, you're still speaking out, so you haven't really relented. But the thing is, for me personally, just being online, having a platform personally, for me, means that like I talk whatever it is, I talk my own, I say whatever it is that I feel weighing on me. And it's not really in anticipation of response or dialogue. Sometimes it's just like, okay, I've said this, and that's the end of it. Because you also need to need to create a mind of your own online, or at least project that. Because if you don't, you have yourself apologizing in instances where you haven't really faulted, or it's really none of anyone's business. Yeah. And like for me, it's a reflection of my own personality, where like I see myself as someone very individualistic, and for that, like I have opinions, I have a different way in which I live my life, of course guided by certain morals and principles and values, and those are the strengthening features for me. Everything else lays outside of these pillars for me. Yeah. And so sometimes it becomes difficult from like to feel like my voice is diminishing, even in a space of disagreement or non-engagement. But at the end of the day, I just know that I have to talk about the things I want to talk about.
Okay, so let's take a step away from the individual and let's look at the collective. Because earlier on, I recall you said with the increase in attacks, especially to girls that were speaking up, because ArewaMeToo did give girls platform to be able to speak about issues that were important to them, talk about sexual violence, harassment, and so on and so forth, women's autonomy, political participation. It kind of gave rise to a lot of conversations, and where harassment feature in some of these conversations that we have. But then we've also seen that with the incessant attack, women have some girls have, gotten back into their shell. Now, as a collective, what do you think can be done to ensure that women are able to express their freedom of speech, and their thoughts without necessarily having to suffer some of these things that you have suffered?
Yeah.
So if you're to advise people that are just trying to speak up on social media or trying to just share their thoughts, what is it that they can do, or what is it that you think the government can do, or what is it that you think civil society can do, or what is it that you think tech companies that come up with these platforms can do to ensure that there is at least safety and women's voices and safety for women is paramount, too.
So I think, and this is something that is being looked at intensely on the issue of cyberbullying at the nexus of feminism and other social advocacy. There's a lot of resources being poured into understanding cyberbullying in that instance, SGBV, and that. Like personally, what I've seen is, or like what I have done or understood, is you have to identify where a lot of the attacks are coming from, In many instances, you find that a lot of those malicious voices also find their own sort of stairwell to fame from those instances of attacking you. So, really understanding where that attack comes from, because there's always an agenda, and a lot of that has to do with finding a voice for yourself as a maligning voice, right? Because it's a quick place to fame. It's like you're racing to popularity. Once you're seen as someone that piles on particularly like popular feminist voices. So like I avoid ever engaging with those voices I identify. There's some voices that found popularity on the backs of harassing you know ArewaMeToo members, and till today, they've transformed into different other things. But paramount to stifling that pathway to fame is that you don't engage them, you personally, right? It doesn't mean that you stop other people from, you just ignore the commentary, because that's as good as airing it. Like secondly, the importance that community plays in all of this cannot be overstated. You need to find your community, people that you have a lot in common with in terms of your ideologies, your beliefs, and the kind of society that you want to live in, right? And like at the onset, this is something that you and I had established within ourselves and within a lot of other people. Nuera here, that we all go way back, and forming those bonds within a time of incessant attacks is very important. So you have that support system, but also you have civil society that may not be always apparent publicly in conversations, but privately in more structured forms, you're having to coalesce and find ways to broaden the influence of your message or your advocacy. So establishing that kind of relationship with the civil society always helps across different sectors, because there's a nexus of so many things that comprise of online gender-based violence. You have the sexual violence, you have the security issue, you have the political aspect of it. So in all of these spaces, there are different individuals and civil society organizations that sort of shoulder over it, and having a string of comms and all of that supports that lens that is being lent to you, and you lend to a lot of these factions is really helpful at the end of the day. But also I think that's very structured in a way, structured response, and a lot of people don't really have that kind of support system.
Yeah, but sorry to interject, I'm also just thinking around the Red Pill movement, because we keep on talking about attackers and harassers, but I think, and then we keep on thinking that these are not very organized ways, and we keep then constantly thinking of organized ways to attack these issues. But I would argue that it is very organized, because I think in recent years we have seen the influx of the Red Pill movement, the incels, those are saying, oh, women should do this, women shouldn't do that. When women are working or whatever, women get attacked. And it's not just a northern Nigeria problem. It's not just a Nigeria problem. It's becoming a global issue. Mm-hmm. What do you think can be done? Because now you see people putting into the heads of young boys, even in school, and then you see them say these opinions out on social media, or women shouldn't work, or women shouldn't, women are being masculine when they do certain things, trying to erode the agency that women have over the years fought for. Mm-hmm. And I think all of these conversations are connected. So I just wanted to get your thoughts also on the Red Pill movement, and whether you think they have established a base.
Yeah.
in Nigeria?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, like the quickest path to popularity online is piling on feminists, which the main section of society that does that are those red pill movement followers, and it's people that start from just piling on is ceaselessly to becoming a voice of their own, to having some sort of repute within their communities. Of course, like eventually they get sucked into this more organized structure, right? And it's organized in a way that it's also very decentralized, right? Everyone listens to everyone within that movement, and like the overlords sort of becomes like their gods in essence. And so that's organization, and it's to an extent organic in a way, just as a lot of feminist movements are organic. That also becomes the other shell of it. And I think this red pill movement is just an extension of very traditionalist views of society, or of traditionalists themselves, because they all believe in all these traditional roles for women, and women being put in their places. And the only difference is that the red pill movement are very online savvy, whereas like the traditional guys are not very, and losing their influence amongst the much younger generation, whereas the red pill movement guys pick up, right? They have the influence, they have the online following, and in that process they lend those platforms back to the traditionalists, because that's what they're pegging their beliefs on. So yeah, like these are not like these have always been conventional ways of attacking women, right?
Sorry. So yeah, just take us away from the collective and then center back to the individual, of you as Fakhrriyyah Hashim, and the movement that you started, ArewaMeToo, and how that has led to so much attack on your person, and that has sort of defined you to a very large extent, and you get attacked based off on that, but normally we know that when we talk about the online world and the physical world, they can be very different. But in the online world and the physical world, women still get attacked regardless. So who you are in the physical world has its own violent story, and who you are in the online world has the same violent story. So I'm just wondering if you would look at yourself now in hindsight, and the person that decided to pick up this course and the things you have learned along the way, how would you describe yourself? Who would you say you are?
Oof, that's a loaded question.
It is.
I think so. All of this culminates, right, into making of an individual, their experiences anyway. And for me, it came from a place of like having moved around a bit. I think my main years of early adulthood were in the middle of a conflict, right? In the middle of a civil war. Like for most of it, I'd been very removed from what was happening at the time. And it wasn't until like the conflict got like deeper and deeper beyond repair that, I found myself really having a personal stake in this conflict because of like my own physical welfare, if maybe that was the trigger. But I think, in hindsight, like it really just comes from a place of, I want to live in a functional society, where I'm respected as a woman, I'm afforded the same rights, I'm just able to function just like any other person, but also much like any other part of the world that is functional. And I think that placed a lot of anger in me because having to come back, home, and really just seeing things that I had observed and just ignored in the past, like carving a different meaning, different meanings of their own, and just not having the patience to just endure. It's like, okay, I'm probably not gonna be here for a while. I'll probably jump on some other thing. But I think that really stayed with me because I didn't want to settle on the quality of life for me. Like if it's security, like socio-political issues, economic issues, I just didn't want to accept the fact that just because I'm Nigerian, that means the extension of my life is going to be met with just, lower quality of life and all that comes with that experience. So, and I think that is something that hasn't really changed in a big way. I still look at myself in the instance and in the kind of world I want to live in, and the kind of world I want other people to experience. And I guess this is where the persistence comes from.
I think it just kind of cycles back to what feminists always say, that the personal eventually becomes political, because it's like, I want this for myself, so by extension, I want it for all women. I want us to just talk about the ArewaMeToo movement. It was such an organic movement, and everyone took it to mean what it means for them, and they ran along with it, and did whatever it is they wanted it to become, wanted it to mean for them. But in all of it, I just wanted to know if there's one thing that you're particularly proud of, about what the movement has amounted to.
I think I look at like all the women that we started out with, and quite a few of them much younger than me, and having seen them, just carry on, being consistent and building their own structures, that having that reputation, building that reputation of being a prominent voice within various fields. Like for me, I think that's the best part of it. Seeing people come into leadership that they were always meant to hold, and that platform being sort of the pathway for them to get into their leadership positions. And I'm very grateful for that, grateful to see that, because then, for me, just emphasizes the fact that it was always going to be something bigger than me or bigger than anyone else. And it did become that. And looking at what's been built, what is being built, some of the leaders in voices around gender-based violence, around feminism, to have come into, that light, into, their wholeness and full voices through that, for me is inspiring.
Okay. So as it is customary, because we're winding up now, we normally like to spotlight women that other people might not know. So it can be anybody, any woman that inspires you. So yes, do you have any woman that you want to spotlight that inspires you, that you're just like, I see you, I see what you're doing, and I just want you to know that you're amazing?
The person I would like to spotlight is Hadiyah Tilde. She's an author, a writer. So, she's been someone that has been along with us, all of us, for the past few years on ArewaMeToo. Always felt like sort of a shield, right? Firing that protective shield around her friends, and, being an astute feminist while at it, and really a brilliant writer.
Absolutely.
So very young.
Yeah.
And so she's the last person that has inspired me.
Love to see it.
And so it was very good to see her and to know how she's doing, and to feel really proud of a lot of the really great things that she's doing, being a beautiful writer and all of that. So I'll spotlight her dear.
And that's it for this month's edition of Let's Talk SGBV. I remain your host, Hassan Maina. You can send us an email, asvelnigeria@gmail.com, and follow us on all of our social media handles. Thank you, and see you next month. Bye-bye.